Good morning, mathematicians. We are looking at Lesson 8 of Unit 5. We are rounding decimals. This cool down is about rounding to the nearest tenth and thousandths within our decimal number system. Okay, number 1 says that we are to round 17 and 637 thousandths to the nearest tenth, and we're encouraged to use the number line if they are helpful, as we have done in this Lesson 8. So let's take a look at our very top number line because we're rounding to the nearest tenth. So really we're asking, is our value 17 and 638 thousandths, is it closer to this 17 and 6 tenths, or is it closer to this 17 and 7 tenths? Notice, boys and girls, I have these intervals on the number line. And what I should be picturing as I'm thinking of this number line and thinking of these given intervals, I should be thinking of that hundredths place that exists between 17 and 60 hundredths and 17 and 70 hundredths, right? So my first interval is 17 and 61 hundredths. 17 and 62 hundredths, 17 and 63 hundredths, 17 and 64 hundredths, and so on as I continue on my number line, making my way all the way to 17 and 7 tenths, which is the same as 17 and 70 hundredths. Okay, now let's go back to the idea of our actual number in question. Our number that we are rounding is 17 and 637 thousandths. So if I go back to my number line, I know that that exists between this 17 and 63 hundredths and 17 and 64 hundredths. Now that value would be about right here where I'm putting my where I'm putting my blue dot. That is where that 17 and 637 thousandths, that's where that is going to exist. Now, what I'm looking to see is this spot that I marked on my number line, is that closer to 17 and 6 tenths, or is it closer to 17 and 7 tenths? Well, clearly I can see that it is closer to 17 and 6 tenths. So we will come up to this number 1, and we are asked simply to round. So our answer can just be written so that we see our 17, our whole number part, we have our decimal, and we're ending at the 6 in the tenths place. Because certainly with our number line, we have shown that it does round here to 17 and 6 tenths. Now let's take a look at number 2. Number 2 says 17 and 637 thousandths to the hundredths place. That is what we're asked to round to here. Again, we're encouraged to use the number line if it helps. And certainly when we look at our number line and when we label those intervals of our number line, we should be thinking of this. So we should be thinking that, again, between 17 and 63 hundredths and 17 and 64 hundredths, take a look at these intervals that exist between. I can use those thousandths place digits to count up all the way to 64 hundredths or 640 thousandths, right? Now I can go ahead and label exactly where 17 and 637 thousandths, where that exists on my number line. I'm going to put that in green, and I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to put my labeling right here to show that that is exactly where that number exists. Now, in the same way as we did for number 1, we're asking ourselves which it is closer to, but this time we're zeroing in on the hundredths place. So is this closer to 17 and 64 hundredths, or is it closer to 17 and 63 hundredths? Well, clearly we can see that this is closer to this end of our number line. It is closer to 17 and 64 hundredths. So we're going to go back to number 1. We were told to round and to use the number line if it was helpful. So what we need to do to answer this question is simply write 17 and 64 hundredths, since certainly that is what we get when we round 17 and 637 thousandths to the nearest hundredth. Now I have made my answers on the page, but certainly they look a little small considering that I have those number lines and I've labeled so many things on my number line. I even have some arrows. So I'm just going to make my answers just a little bit larger so that you can check and see if your cool down answer matches what we have, and pause and consider how we have shown it with the number line, because that certainly can help us picture what is happening where we're rounding to the nearest tenth and the nearest thousandths and the nearest hundredth, as we see in number 2.